America is a land of great museums, and every museum has spellbinding stories to tell.
The eyes of any big cat pierce right through me.
The National Zoo is our nation's zoo, and as part of the Smithsonian, we have programs all over the globe.
We all are working together to try to protect our planet's biodiversity.
So by saving one species, we save a whole ecosystem.
Wild Thing, the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C. Major funding for great museums is provided by the Eureka Foundation, dedicated to the educational power of television and new media. Exercise your curiosity. Explore America's great museums.
Strolling the grounds at the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C. is not your ordinary walk in the park.
The National Zoo is a park full of wild animals. We are in a unique position to study their biology, their reproductive biology, their habits, the physics of animal movement, and we use those animals as ambassadors for their species so that people appreciate the animals and are inspired to conserve their habitats in nature.
Zoology is a branch of biology dealing in the study, the science of animals. So that's a big part of who we are. It's also a park. It's a place where people come to enjoy themselves.
And it's a reminder that we don't rule the earth. We share it.
The idea of knowing that as a human being that I'm vulnerable because there are animals out in the wild that are bigger and stronger and faster than me, and that I could become the prey and they would be the predator. I mean, I think that's something that we all are intrigued by.
Many animals on display in zoo exhibits are critically endangered in the wild. Some are even extinct in nature and only exist in captivity.
We are really talking about trying to engage our visitors, our guests, into the plight of what's going on out there in the wild. Extinctions of species is one problem. Extinction of habitats is an even bigger problem.
Our scientists work on the ground in very far-flung places, from the hottest desert in Africa to the wettest forest of Brazil.
I love going to Kenya and being able to work with a kori buster, to work with pandas in China. I mean, how much better can it get?
It's fantastic. I get to work with captive animals, I get to work with wild animals, and I get to talk to people about some of the stuff we're getting to do in Brazil.
I like for people to leave this zoo thinking that the National Zoo rocks. You know, we're great. We're going to Namibia, we're going to China, we're doing the research in range countries as well. That makes me feel really good.
Here in a quiet oasis in the heart of the nation's capital, the wild things roam.
The O-line is a nickname for our orangutan transit system, and we call it the O-line because here in Washington we have a subway system, and there's the red line and the green line and the yellow line, and so we nicknamed our orangutan system the O-line.
Crossing directly over the public courtyard, the O-line is only 40 feet above the ground at its lowest point.
It's a great way to see orangutans, to see them moving up high, the way their bodies are designed. And even though I've seen it, I don't know, countless times, I still get a thrill. It's particularly fantastic when you see our male orangutan. The visitors just gasp because it's so spectacular to see him move.
Orangutans once ruled the treetops throughout the tropical forests of Asia. Now they live only in Sumatra, in Borneo, and in captivity.
When we look at an animal in a zoo, I think we should feel uncomfortable. It's important for us to understand that zoos exist because of what is happening in their natural environment.
People have a perception that the wild is not disappearing in huge chunks on a daily basis. These animals have no place to go in the wild unless we, humanity, preserves their habitat in nature.
Take, for instance, these little monkeys, golden lion tamarins. They live exclusively in Brazil in an area called the Atlantic Coastal Rainforest. Golden lion tamarins are one of the most endangered primates in the world.
The number one problem is habitat loss. And this is true for animals all over the world. In the area where the tamarins are from, it's right outside of Rio de Janeiro, about an hour and a half's drive or so, and less than 2% of their habitat remains.
Researcher Jennifer Mickelberg manages the golden lion tamarins at the National Zoo and in Brazil.
We do treat the golden lion tamarins like they are wild animals because they really are. They're not domesticated, they're not our pets, and any sort of tamarin that has a very close bond with a human does not make a good reintroduction candidate. They just simply cannot do the things they need to do to be a good wild monkey.
At the National Zoo, golden lion tamarins are born and bred for the purpose of being reintroduced into the wilds of Brazil.
You guys see they're eating that apple there? And this is what I put inside that apple. Do you see what those are? Mealworms. Mealworms. They love to eat those. Those are like popcorn for the monkeys. Around 30 years ago, there were perhaps less than 200 golden lion tamarins in the wild, and everyone knows this is just simply not a large enough population to maintain a long-term viability. And now we're actually looking at around 1,500 golden lion tamarins in the wild due to our conservation efforts, working with the locals, and also a reintroduction program that National Zoo had a big role in. Orange, that's an orange. So a little bit of corn. What are those?
Grapes.
Grapes, monkeys love grapes. And what's this? Banana, and all monkeys love bananas. It's actually true. And what's very exciting is that in 2004, golden lion tamarins were downlisted from critically endangered to endangered. So that's a big celebration for us.
Before being sent into the Brazilian rainforest, the golden lion tamarins must first learn to be wild monkeys in the zoo. Each spring, the golden lion tamarins are set free in the woods at the National Zoo in a free-ranging exhibit area called Beaver Valley.
Would you be willing to jump like that, way up high?
Yeah.
You would? So this is the area of the golden lion tamarin, and they're free to go wherever they like. And instead of taking the road, what they typically do is take this tree way up high here and cross over, and then spend their whole afternoon in this area over here, free-ranging, foraging, looking for food, sometimes encountering a deer or two that they like to chase out of their exhibit. But they really are free to go wherever they want. And if they wanted to, they could go to the White House and visit the president.
They can run down the fence line, or they can join zoo visitors on the sidewalk. Here, they learn basic survival skills, like how to get away from predators or how to forage for food.
And then we've got this completely successful reintroduction program into the Atlantic rainforest of Brazil, where these animals are put down in their nest boxes from the National Zoo. They're put into the Brazilian rainforest and they're released out there.
So what does this look like to you? It's a picnic cooler, right?
It's a golden lion tamarin nest box.
And we've modified it so the monkeys can sleep inside. So they can crawl in this hole, and then if I open it up, see, what do we have? 2 levels. So it's like they're a 2-level condo. So many times when we talk about conservation, it leaves people feeling sad and helpless, but this is a good example of how, with just people working together, you can really change the future for a species.
And the future of the planet.
While some people say, well, golden lion tamarins are small, maybe they don't have a huge role in the ecosystem, I would say they probably do.
Be inspired by these animals. They are ambassadors for their species. The species is an ambassador for its wild habitat. The wild habitat is disappearing. We have security populations in zoos, but they're just representative of the animals that are losing their place in nature because of so many humans. Take that away as the message of the zoo.
When people come to the zoo, it's not just the one animal that they're seeing or the 2 animals that they're seeing. Those animals are representative of a story that we're trying to tell. They're representative of their species. And they're also representative of a lot of the scientific work we're doing to help save these animals, both in captivity and in the wild.
There is no better ambassador for the cause of conservation than the charismatic giant panda.
Well, giant pandas are really they're the rock stars of the animal world.
Black and white just does something for every human on the planet, and these pandas are the ambassadors not only for panda bears in the wild as a species, but for bamboo habitat for all that is China.
Lisa Stevens is curator of giant pandas at the National Zoo.
The cute factor is a great factor to have when you're dealing with an endangered species, because cuteness is a great hook to get people interested and to get them to care. That's our famous Taishan, doing what he does best, which is sleep.
Oh, I want to touch it.
The panda cub Taishan was born at the National Zoo in 2005 using artificial insemination.
Oh, look, he's gonna look up. Aren't you lucky?
Oh, please, get back up.
He might eat some bamboo for us.
Taishan was the first surviving panda cub born at the National Zoo after 30 years of captive breeding trials, tribulations, and disappointment.
Pandas are a tricky lot. Evolutionarily, they don't do themselves any favor. They ovulate once a year. They generally have one cub every other year under the best of conditions. They're specialized feeders. They need a certain type of bamboo where they starve in the wild. So they're a real challenge.
The bamboo that giant pandas need to survive only grows naturally in certain temperate forests in China.
Through fossil evidence, we know that pandas ranged all the way down into Southeast Asia and all throughout China. But with the disappearance of their temperate forests, their numbers are now down to just a mere 1,600.
We have done a ton of work on pandas. We've done the biological science of pandas, we've done the nutrition of pandas, we've done the reproductive biology of pandas, and we have trained over 150 Chinese scientists to preserve and conserve pandas in the wild.
Of course, reproduction is the essence of survival.
The goal of any breeding program in a zoo is really an insurance policy against extinction. And so a lot of the techniques that are used in human reproduction and infertility now, procedures like artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization, we're applying to the endangered species.
Unlike human females who ovulate monthly, a panda female has just one chance a year to get pregnant.
The female only comes in estrus once a year, and so she has a very small window of fertility. It may be 24 or 48 hours, and so not only did we have to develop the technology to do the artificial insemination, we had to really get the window of fertility down.
To further complicate matters, most giant panda males in the captive population just aren't interested in sex. Only about 15 males in the world will breed naturally in captivity.
They may be the best genetic match, but they may not necessarily want to breed on their own. And so if the natural breeder male does not breed, then we're ready for artificial insemination with semen from another male.
The National Zoo's famous female panda, Mei Shang, came into estrus in 2005.
Mei Shang is an excellent animal to work with. She's one of the high-profile animals, not for the zoo only, but for the whole DC area.
Dr. Carlos Sanchez led the anesthesia team for the artificial insemination of Mei Shang.
We zoo vets and wildlife vets our job is based on anesthesia. We're trying to do conservations. We cannot afford to lose an animal under anesthesia. You know, it's the other part that not a lot of people see, because they just see the end result, the cute baby panda, but a lot of people get involved for that kind of procedure.
Dr. Jo Gail Howard performed the artificial insemination.
We used a laparoscope, which is an instrument that's used in human medicine a lot, to visualize the reproductive tract of the female, go through the cervix so that the sperm could be deposited in the uterus.
The video on the monitor is actually giant panda sperm. Part was used for the insemination. The rest was frozen or cryopreserved.
It goes into the Genome Resource Bank here at the National Zoo, which is a repository of sperm, embryos, even eggs now. So this semen could be shipped internationally. It could be shipped nationally, say to other facilities that have giant pandas like Zoo Atlanta or Memphis Zoo. So it's just another tool we have for the genetic management program of endangered species.
I have to say that the birth of Taishan is one of the greatest moments of my career. It was the ultimate reward. It was the ultimate reward for all the hard work that so many people put toward saving this species.
Taishan and his parents live along the Asia Trail at the National Zoo, where the giant panda exhibit is designed to mimic wild panda habitat in China.
It's very rocky, it's hilly. The tree species that you see here are comparable to the species that would occur in panda habitat. And this is Taishan's favorite tree. He likes to climb up and perch right in the middle of this tree.
Asia Trail is a complete immersion. We have tried to make people feel like they're really in Asia. Everything from the landscaping to the exhibits themselves to the colors reflect what Asia is.
Most importantly, the 6-acre Asia Trail is designed to make the endangered species who live there feel at home. Like these intriguing little red pandas with their ringed raccoon-style tails.
Red pandas are very similar to giant pandas in that they're developed to eat bamboo, but they eat the leaves off of bamboo instead of the stems.
Well, historically, zoos have been menageries of animals, but now there's a lot of science behind living museums.
If someone was of the mind frame that zoos were circuses or just for entertainment, I would initially tell them that's what zoos used to be. And that was in the 1800s when zoos first started coming up.
But the original idea behind the Smithsonian National Zoo was different. Concerned about the rapid disappearance of American wildlife like the bison and the beaver, zoo founder William Hornaday envisioned a facility that would breed endangered animals in captivity and educate the public about conservation. In 1889, Hornaday opened a small trial zoo on the mall outside the Smithsonian Castle. 3 years later, the Smithsonian National Zoological Park, designed by America's premier landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, opened in D.C.'s Rock Creek Valley.
And you can see remnants of zoos of old, especially in a zoo, the age of this zoo. That's one of the things I love about working at this zoo, is you can see the history, of this place.
Some of the zoo's early features are still in place. The walkways, the landscaping, the magnificent reptile house. With its intricate brickwork, relief carvings, columns, and other ornamentation, the reptile house looks quite reptilian.
In zoos of past, these exhibits were concrete and steel. People would come by, look in the cage, see the animal, and go to the next exhibit. Now, we're asking you to open your eyes and look.
We're part of the Smithsonian Institution, and so having the backup of the largest museum complex in the world really adds value to what we can do as a zoo. No other zoo in the world has that.
It is our nation's zoo. We're free, so as such, we're available to everybody, but we're also available to people around the globe, both through our international programs as well as the website.
The National Zoo can also be watched from somebody's home computer. We have the panda cams. There are over 40 cameras in the panda habitat alone. There are dozens of cameras elsewhere in the zoo in the cheetah habitat and the elephant habitat and some of the bird habitats. And you can go to your computer at home and you can find out lots of stuff about the National Zoo, and you can watch pandas 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Personally, I think it's very fulfilling to be able to be a veterinarian, to have trained all my life for this spot, and then have the opportunity to really help animals in the wild.
Dr. Suzanne Murray is chief veterinarian for the Smithsonian National Zoo.
When we work in an institution that has 2,800 different animals and hundreds of different species, we really need to be able to jump from species to species at the drop of a hat, whether it's a veiled chameleon, a quarry bustard. Even for today, we had panda ultrasound scheduled in the morning, we have great ape training, and then a golden lion tamarin was ill, and then we had to check an elephant who had a vaccine reaction. And whether we're working on coral that has a new kind of parasite and we're trying to find the life cycle and how to best treat that, or the best way to ultrasound a giant anteater who's pregnant, well, how long should she be pregnant for? How big should the babies be? The more we learn, the more there is to know.
On today's schedule is this handsome Micronesian kingfisher.
We're about to go through this room into the radiology room. We have a Micronesian kingfisher that's receiving a pre-ship examination.
Basically, this bird is getting a physical.
This is a bird that's going to be going out to another institution to breed. We'll be getting x-rays and a blood sample to make sure it's healthy. It's an endangered species of bird. There's only about 60 to 70 of them in the wild, so his genetics are very valuable. So we have to make sure he's healthy enough, one, to withstand the shipment, and to make sure that we're not sending any diseases to another institution. So this bird is currently receiving an inhalant anesthesia. Anesthesia works by depressing the cardiovascular system, and if you have an endangered species, if there's only 60 or 70 of them left in the wild, you don't want to risk losing an animal. So everybody's works quickly as possible. There's particular views you need to get on x-rays, so that's what they're doing now. They line them up just so we can visualize all organs, once again, to make sure they're nice and healthy. We're about to leave. Okay, so everybody hop out real quick. We have a digital system where you can see here, it's the bird's head, wings, legs, that's the heart, the liver, the lungs. And can you go to the other view? Is it up yet? And then she can darken it up so we can actually see the kidneys, which are right up here. Once again, that's the heart, that's the air sacs. The air sacs look very good. So far, so good.
The kingfisher is removed from anesthesia.
Body up this way a little bit.
Then he is revived with oxygen. The whole procedure takes less than 20 minutes.
We have one of our senior keepers here. She knows a lot about how the animal should be kept, how it should be held safely. Is he getting ready to wake up now? Oh, good. Just don't let him go. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
It is. And then so you can see the bird waking up. And see? And then once again, the way that our keeper Erin is holding, she's got a good grasp on his wings and his head, so he's not going to hurt himself and he's not going to escape either.
The bird collection represents the most diverse group of animals at the zoo, from the 5-foot-tall flightless cassowary to the common crowned pigeon and the bald eagle, now downlisted from endangered to threatened. Year-round, a large indoor jungle houses free-flying tropical birds. But in warmer weather, many of the zoo's birds fly freely in a magnificent outdoor flight cage. Other birds, like the familiar and flamboyant flamingo, live mostly in outdoor exhibit yards, as does the endangered African Kori bustard.
The Kori bustard is the largest flighted bird. They're huge.
They take off like a B-52 takes off, and when they land, they almost crash land. And our head veterinarian, Suzanne Murray, is working with Kori bustards in Africa.
And to be able to actually catch up these birds, learn about their health, and then release them is fascinating. So we learn as much as we can of animals in the wild and then translate that directly into how we can best take care of them here at the zoo.
People, and especially kids, they tend to think that most of the great discoveries have already been made, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Our knowledge about, wild animals, about endangered species, is rudimentary at best. And there's 4,400 some odd species of mammals, and of that, there's probably only detailed knowledge about 200, 250 of those species. And even animals that were as common as cheetahs, they've been maintained in captivity for the last 1,000 years or more. We didn't know about their reproductive cycle in any detail until about 10 years ago.
People have come to me and said, wow, this guy knows everything about cheetahs. No way, no way. And that's what's great about science to me, is that you never run out of questions. You never run out of questions.
Biologist Craig Sappho works with cheetahs at the National Zoo. As a small-town boy in North Carolina, Craig was fascinated with evolution, survival of the fittest, and the idea of hunt or be hunted.
As I started to learn more about cats, and big cats particularly, I started to fall in love with cheetahs. Because of the big cats, cheetahs are the most specialized at hunting, at performing that one function of hunting things.
The world's fastest land mammal, the cheetah, is built for speed, with a deep chest, small waist, and long legs.
Cats are cats. They sleep a lot because they're conserving energy for the hunt. You'll see that in your house cat. We see that with the cheetahs.
In the confines of captivity, zookeepers conduct cheetah training to exercise the cats. It's also an opportunity for keepers to talk with visitors.
A lot of people get really confused when they see us in the yards with the cats. It has nothing to do with being people or not being people. It has to do with your size and whether or not you're considered a prey item by the cat. Clearly, we're not prey size for for a house cat, where we are for something like a lion, and in some cases we are for something like a cheetah. These animals would be animals that it could hunt and kill easily. So you'd see a much different reaction from Zazie if we had little kids out in the yard.
While Craig talks with zoo visitors, the second keeper manages the cat for safety.
Cheetahs are symbolic of the wilds of Africa, the magnificence of animals that can run that fast and hunt that way. But they're in trouble. I mean, they are a top predator in an ecosystem. They need to have prey to eat. Their numbers have been declining for decades. They need huge expanses of land. They are in big trouble.
Cheetahs have about roughly 12 to 15,000 animals left in the wild. To put it in perspective, that's from about 50,000 animals in the 1950s. So, you know, just over 50 years later, we've taken out more than 50% of those animals.
Today, the greatest concentration of cheetahs in the wild is in the country of Namibia in southern Africa. But the great spotted cat once ranged throughout Africa, the Middle East, and even into India.
That area used to be full of cheetahs, and now it's just pockets here and there. And what that does to a species is it eliminates the breeding potential of that species. And so that's where cheetahs are really in trouble.
To ensure against total extinction of cheetahs, zoos maintain a self-sustained reserve or security population in captivity.
Early breeding efforts for cheetahs failed miserably, largely because we didn't understand the science behind breeding cheetahs. We just thought, you know, they're cats. They'll breed like any cat. You know, you put a male and a female together and they're gonna do what they do naturally. Nature will take its course. It's not how it works.
Well, of course, in captivity, what's interesting is, in many cases, zoos will actually keep animals in groups. And actually having animals in groups suppresses reproductive behavior, suppresses ovarian activity. I mean, there's two parts.
Dr. David Wilt, head of reproductive physiology at the Smithsonian National Zoo, is known internationally as a founding father of cheetah science.
Cheetahs are normally a solitary animal in nature, and we know that there are territories. The animals have territories, and when those territories cross, they have the opportunity to reproduce.
So we've changed our exhibits to allow for us to manage cats like that. We have multiple exhibits. We have space to shift cheetahs around anywhere we want to shift them within our compound and get females totally away from males, females away from each other, which is another important component to it. And we're far better at mimicking their natural social structure and their natural lifestyle.
And so in many cases, some of these basic studies have just allowed us to improve the husbandry of the animal, which in turn has allowed it to reproduce.
I like this, though.
Craig Sappho manages the natural breeding program for cheetahs.
Each cheetah is an individual, just like every person is an individual. If you look at Zazie, she's just over 100 pounds. You know, she's not too much bigger than a big dog.
Zazie came to the National Zoo in 2004 from a facility in Texas.
Zazie was, at that time, a very valuable cheetah. Value to us is measured in terms of how well represented is her genetic line amongst cheetahs in North America. And she wasn't very well represented.
Within a year, Zazie bred and produced 5 surviving cubs, the second litter ever at the National Zoo. Her sister, back in Texas, also had a litter.
So the more family members you add to that genetic line, the less valuable she becomes. Zazie is no longer valuable to us for genetics, except if you add the caveat of science, artificial insemination. Think about that, because the sperm that comes from Namibia is not represented here in North America.
On the front line in Namibia is Adrienne Crozier, a reproductive physiologist with the National Zoo.
My role is linking the biology of the cheetahs in the wild with the biology and management of cheetahs in captivity. We evaluate the female reproductive health, use ultrasound, use hormones, and do in vitro fertilization. And we've banked almost 300 sperm samples from cats in Namibia. So all of those samples are frozen in liquid nitrogen and can theoretically be used for artificial inseminations anywhere in the world.
We know Zazie's a great mom. She's a proven breeder. That's number one, that she knows how to do it, and a proven good mother. So Zazie could go from being a very non-valuable cat to adding Namibian semen. She becomes extremely valuable.
To further enhance the success of captive breeding, The National Zoo has a new 9-acre cheetah yard at the Conservation and Research Center, its rural research facility in Virginia.
We built a facility here that will allow us to maintain significant numbers of adult males and adult females. We also have a lover's lane set up here so the males can run down lover's lane and identify the females that are in heat and are receptive to breeding. So now these animals have an ideal place to live, to reproduce, to be healthy, and for us to do our scientific studies.
Well, the National Zoo really is composed of two great facilities at different locations, but we're one zoo operation.
Home base for the National Zoo's global science is the Conservation and Research Center in Front Royal, Virginia, a 3,200-acre facility just 70 miles from the National Zoological Park in Washington, D.C.
It's all very private and quiet, so the animals that really need that kind of space, that really need that kind of quiet, are out at the Conservation and Research Center, and our scientists study their reproductive biology and their hormone cycling and their regular biology so that we can develop effective conservation management plans for those species in nature.
This is a bottlenose dolphin.
Every October, for one weekend only, the Conservation and Research Center, or CRC for short, opens to the public.
They grab food and they have to swallow it whole.
Scientists, staff, and volunteers are on hand to talk about the animals and their habitats, and to explain captive breeding programs for endangered species.
It's absolutely true that a species like the Przewalski's horse or the scimitar horned oryx, golden lion tamarins, without the work that zoos have done, there's no question those species probably would be extinct today.
The CRC has about 400 animals, from cranes to clouded leopards. At least half of the 40 species represented are officially endangered.
Many of them have been taken right from the edge of extinction and sustained in such a way that they could be reintroduced into the wild.
Hey, Carmen. Hi. Hi, Eve. You can go ahead and come in.
Such is the case of the Burmese brow-antlered deer, or Eld's deer, a dwindling species native to Myanmar, or Burma.
What is that, huh? Hey, girls. Hello, girls.
If things don't have stripes and spots and they don't look like a giant panda, people may not know about them. But the truth is, Eld's deer are a species where there are only about 1,200 that remain in the wild, which is fewer than there are giant pandas. And yet most people have never heard of them.
This is Carmen. She's hand-raised, which is why she's so friendly. And this is her daughter, Eve. She was born on Christmas Eve, not this past year, but the year before. And her other daughter, Autumn, who's 3 years old. And Eve was in a natural breeding situation, so she may be pregnant. She would be due in November.
Dolores Reed is an animal keeper at the CRC.
Are you gonna come outside?
So we took an interest in Eld's deer at the National Zoo here at CRC about almost 30 years ago, and we are clearly the champions for their captive breeding management.
More than 100 Eld's deer have been born at the CRC.
Without the work that we started, most of us have very, very little doubt that that species would now be extinct in the wild.
This barn is set up as a research barn. Each stall has a special drain where I can lock the females in and collect urine from them. Or there's a chute system so I can run animals around, separate them, do anything I need to with them, lock them in if I need to. And we do reproductive research here. And right now we have our females in this barn. Come on, girls, come on out here. Hey, lady. Hi, girls. Brought some company. Hi, girls.
This is a species that may not do that well on display in a typical zoo, but they do very, very well in a place like the CRC.
I've got 16 females total out here.
Herd animals, like the Eld's deer, need space, and lots of it.
These deer are different from, say, like a whitetail. A whitetail deer is a browser, so they eat grasses and tree branches, and you'll see them usually in the forested habitat doing a lot of browsing on trees and stuff. These guys are actually true grazers, so they prefer the grasses, which is why they're out here in this grassy field.
The fields are specially cultivated, mostly with switchgrass, a warm season grass from the American plains.
The males are in the other barn. Actually, if you pan that way, there's a male watching us from his outside run.
This is the buck, Orion.
He's pretty much come out of rut already. This is their normal behavior. They're pretty shy.
Males and females are kept in separate areas until a breeding match is made through the Eld's Deer Species Survival Plan.
The species survival plan is really something that only a select number of species have in place, but once we have that, it means that we're really giving it our highest level of attention to maintain that species for future generations.
Stud bookkeeper Melissa Rodden works with the Species Survival Plan, or SSP, for the Eld's Deer.
A stud book plays a really important role in the species survival program because without knowing the pedigree or the background of the animals, there would be no way that you could determine which animal should breed with which one.
If you have that information, you can actually do genetic matches. You can, like a dating service, you can decide which male should be bred with which female.
This table here shows you the animals in our population that are the most genetically valuable animals. So, for example, this female, Rachel, can be paired with this male, Bambi, to hopefully produce a fawn.
Hey, Bambi.
Over in the male barn, the buck, Bambi, is still in his rut, or breeding period.
The males will do that with each other. They're like sizing each other up. They'll walk next to each other, a parallel walk, and say, I'm tougher than you are. They don't actually want to fight if they don't have to. I'm gonna stay right there and rub the door.
During the rut, males exhibit tough guy behavior in order to attract females.
You stay over there. Getting a little too brave. He's going to, don't be surprised, he's going to strike the...
Eld's deer live in dry deciduous forest in Burma. If we save Eld's deer, we save dry deciduous forest. And so by saving one species, we save a whole ecosystem, and humans benefit, very directly from that by the services that those ecosystems provide.
Humans also compete very directly with animals for those same ecosystem services. In the last century, the Przewalski's horse, or pea horse, now extinct in the wild, lost out to nomads in a battle for water in the grasslands of Mongolia.
Hi, ladies. Hi, girls. Hi, girls. This is Brandy and Tracy. Brandy came to us from New York. She's about 8 or 10, and Tracy's been here most of her life. She's like 23.
All breeds of the domestic horse, from Shetland ponies to Clydesdales, took to the bit and bridle thousands of years ago. The pea horse is not just another breed. It's another species, and it has never been domesticated.
They're sort of like the precursor to the domestic horse. They're one step below the domestic horse. They don't have a forelock, which is the hair that sort of falls down between most horses' eyes. They also have, they call it an erect mane. They have a stripe down their back, a dun stripe. And their tails are different too. A horse will have long hair pretty much all the way down the length of it. These guys have a lot of shorter hair right up at the base of it. And all Przewalski horses look like this. They have the dark nostrils and then a little bit of white, and the dark legs and the lighter body.
This species was descended from only 14 founders. 14 individuals survived, and all living individuals today are derived from those 14 individuals. And so when you only have that small of a founding population, genetic management is incredibly important, because that's all you're ever going to have. Those animals went down to a near extinct status.
So we're trying to do natural breeding here. Our population has gotten older, so we're having some trouble. We're not having very much success. We're trying to trace their cycles, play with them a little bit, give them hormones to see what we can do to help them along.
Brandy and Tracy are part of a harem belonging to the pea horse stallion named Frog.
We're uniquely positioned to play a major role in helping to conserve them. These are herd animals. They have males that have harems, and they take up space. And most zoos are not equipped to handle large hooved animals in herd-like situations. And what we're trying to do is maintain them for 100 years or 200 years into the future, with the idea that some of those descendants will be able to be reintroduced into nature. Hopefully we'll have, one day again, sustainable populations in the wild. But until that time, we have this incredibly important responsibility to maintain that genetic diversity.
The CRC, the Conservation Research Center, plays a huge role in the National Zoo, not just in terms of where we are now or where we came from, but more importantly, where we're going.
Set in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the National Zoo's CRC campus is a former U.S. cavalry depot. Old horse barns and pastures are now used for the CRC's collection of endangered species. Former soldiers' barracks serve as housing for CRC students and scientists.
We can actually use this as a training site for training the current and future generation of conservation professionals. They can come and live in a conservation community where they're having first-person relationships with scientists, with other, say, students that are at their same age and stage of development, and to work in an environment where there's endangered species propagation and science going on, where there's field ecology and lab science going on. And we feel that that is a huge asset to what we have at the National Zoo, and together it makes really an amazing combination that helps us achieve our mission.
Dr. Carlos Sanchez heads up the National Zoo's international vet training programs.
The National Zoo has a huge reputation as a training center, and I think the most rewarding aspect of this job is the opportunity for me to train other people, basically training them to be the new generation of zoo vets and wildlife vets.
Dr. Sanchez himself was trained at the National Zoo.
Carlos Sanchez is the first veterinarian from Mexico that came to the United States and trained in an organized clinical residency program at a top U.S. zoo.
Doing a medical residency in a zoo setting is basically doing medical residency in a hospital. The patients are different. Instead of having just humans, sometimes we have an elephant or a tiger or a fish.
Or a South American maned wolf. The National Zoo has been working to protect maned wolves for nearly 30 years.
This is a maned wolf that has had GI, gastrointestinal problems, basically loose stools for several months. It's not responding very well to medications anymore. So rather than just change medications, we are going to do a complete exam. We are going to anesthetize this maned wolf. We are going to do radiographs. We are going to do oral cavity, hair, blood samples, etc. And then we're going to move it to the surgery suite and do a gastroscopy. This is passing a fiber optic tube and look inside the stomach, and then go to the other end and do a colonoscopy as well.
Working under Dr. Sanchez is a student vet receiving specialist training in wildlife medicine.
She's a U.S. vet, but she's been studying in New Zealand, so it's part of our international program as well. Same thing, just like a dog, intestine, kidney, trying to find out if there is a foreign body, the intestines are full of gas, or they feel particularly thick. This is a thin animal, definitely. And then again, try to feel the intestine between your two hands.
It's a little bit of gas, but not like
not much. We started as a Latin American vet program that now expanded to international vet program, and we bring different veterinarians from different countries, and they spend 6 to 8 weeks with us. This has developed into going to Africa and China and all over the place, but I still have my focus in Latin America.
Our goal in training folks from other countries is not to just train them to be the best in their particular region or their particular country. It's to train them to be the best in the world, period. People are here because they're passionate about what they're doing.
Really, really prominent. That would be an indication of suffragitis.
They are passionate about the dissemination of knowledge, which is, after all, the founding principle behind the Smithsonian Institution and its museums.
The National Zoo is part of this vast museum complex. We have a worldwide network, really, if you think about it. This amazing array of field sites, of scientific collaborations that we have all around the world. So if there's a species that is native to South America, somebody within the Smithsonian has probably worked in that specific area, has connections there, has knowledge of the ecosystem or the life history of the animal we're working with. And that's really an important resource for us to tap into.
In the case of the maned wolf, that somebody is Dr. Louise Emmons, an independent scientist who has tracked a tiny and isolated population in Bolivia for the last 7 years. She and her team capture the wolves, collect basic health data, collar them, then track them to determine their activities and their social and reproductive behavior.
We're going to put on a GPS radio collar.
The spectacular maned wolf is the tallest member of the dog family. They are so secretive that few people even know of them, and they are fast being lost to habitat destruction.
Radio signal's normal.
They are protected in nearly 900,000 acres of the Noel Kempf Mercado National Park in Bolivia, where only about 30 to 50 adult pairs live. This young female is a juvenile, judged too small for a collar. She is released with only an ear tag. The team has followed this wolf for 4 years. His name is Ernie, a 6 or 7 year old male and the father of 2 happy families.
He's got a rotten tooth. He's lost it. Right here, first premolar.
There is a responsibility somewhere for a place like the Smithsonian's National Zoo to step in and take responsibility for trying to conserve and save a species, even though folks may not have heard about it, even though it may not be as cute and cuddly as some other species. That's the kind of role that we can play that really nobody else can do, and we're proud of that.
Consider the Cuban crocodile. Cute and cuddly? No. Endangered? Yes.
Cuban crocodiles just sit there in the water with their beady little eyes looking for prey. This particular crocodile, with no footing, can jump 5 or 6 feet out of the water.
At the National Zoo, the Cuban crocs live in the reptile house, alongside other not-so-cuddly critters, from the rare and endangered Grand Cayman Island iguana.
They're called the blue iguana because their skin turns a really impressive blue.
To the prolific and popular veiled chameleon.
And one of the very cool things about chameleons, see how their eyes go at different directions at different times? That's one of the ways that they're so good at hunting. How cool is that?
That's very
Don't you think?
This showy male is on display. But behind the scenes, a female veiled chameleon is recovering from surgery.
This ward right here is our reptile ward, and it's held at a particular temperature and a particular humidity. One of the things that can happen with reptiles that are about to lay eggs, sometimes they don't lay it. It's called egg binding. In the case of this chameleon, we had to take her to surgery yesterday and to open up her abdomen, take the eggs out. And we actually cut right along here. You can see the suture line. And now she's awake.
Over in the zoo's Amazonia exhibit house is a humid, tropical South American rainforest with plenty of slippery, slimy amphibians, like frogs. 1/3 of the world's 6,000 amphibian species are threatened with extinction.
Panamanian golden frogs and other poison dart frogs are incredibly beautiful. They're the jewels of the rainforest, and they are disappearing.
Panamanian golden frogs are a very good sentinel species. It means they give us an indicator of how things are going on in the wild.
Because amphibians breathe through their skin, they are often the first to succumb to disease or climate change.
A lot of the amphibians worldwide are dying. One of the things we need to figure out is why is that? What can we do to halt that? And should we be taking animals into captivity and hopefully at some point reintroducing them to the wild?
But in order to do that, in order to do the science, in order to save species from extinction or restore animals to the wild, that requires people. We cause the problems by and large, and we're the solution too. There's one of me, and if through my work I can help to create 5 more that are like-minded, or 10 more, or 100 more, or 1,000 more, then we enhance the chance of success in the future.
One of my goals is that everybody that comes through in the National Zoo is engaged with our animals and our professional keepers and interpreters and inspired to take conservation action by the animals.
Anyone who's interested in working with animals, there's a role for people, whether it's as a vet, as a researcher, as a keeper, and even if it's through volunteering, it's a way people can make a difference.
Anyway, these are sloth bears.
The National Zoo has about 800 volunteers, people like George Rutherford, who mans the sloth bear exhibit on the Asia Trail.
They are bears, pure and simple.
You'll see this big 300+ pound bear. You'll see these big claws that are 3 inches long, and you'll think, oh my God, he must be a great predator. But he eats more insects and fruits than he eats meat.
They give us volunteers a chance to show you things like fur, and then they lose their claws, apparently like fingernails from time to time, and the keepers find them. And there's an example of a claw.
Those long claws that the sloth bears have aren't used for killing other animals. They're used for ripping open termite mounds.
They'll dig up the termite mound, then they blow a blast of air through to clean away the extra dirt, and then they suck out the bugs.
Their snouts are developed so that they don't have the top front teeth, and they will literally put their noses down to the ground where the termite mounds are and suck everything up from the termite mounds.
This is a big bear to live on something that small, but in the wild, that's about 90% of their diet is termites.
Sloth bears are mostly from southern India and Sri Lanka. Habitat loss is the greatest threat to their survival, as it is for wild animals everywhere.
As humans, we have a responsibility to these animals. They're not going extinct just because the world is changing for no reason. They're going extinct because humans are modifying and taking habitat from the wild animals. If the habitat is destroyed, human life won't go on as we know it. And so if we don't steer kids these days into conservation, then the whole world is lost.
In a world of high-tech, high-speed, and low attention spans, zoos can inspire children to care about nature.
There's a big difference when you read about something and when you see it in real life. And I've shown children and school kids a picture of an elephant, and they're engaged. And when they come out of the elephant house after seeing an elephant, it's a whole new level of engagement, of really excitement. And that's one thing that the zoo can offer. Come to the National Zoo and you take it up several notches.
Kids these days are not allowed to walk into nature unescorted anymore. And here, a kid can get that close to a poisonous snake or any one of a number of different animals. That's the engagement part. And then the inspiration part is we hope that that inspires that child to become our replacements, be the next explorer and help to save those wild places and wild animals and become that steward of the environment that we all should be.
I was in my 20s. I thought, when I got that bug to do science, I had this idea that I was going to somehow change the world. But at the same time, one becomes aware that the problems that we're working on they're not just single generation problems. They're multi-generational issues. And so there's this responsibility of identifying and nurturing that next generation.
Well, for me, I've always enjoyed the natural world and forests in particular. That's kind of where my specific bond has been. And it was only in college when I really realized that I could actually have a job doing something like what I'm doing now.
Actually, I did my PhD on cattle, but also I was passionate about conservation and animals in zoos linked to conservation projects. So I did a very, very drastic switch into cats.
One of the things that I think is great about being involved in the conservation effort from my position is that we're given opportunities specifically here at this zoo to go and be parts of these things that are literally changing the world.
I believe wholeheartedly in zoos, and I believe more importantly wholeheartedly in the National Zoo.
Our mission as zoos is to make sure that we remind people on a daily basis that the future of humans is linked to the future of other species in the wild.
There's an analogy with kind of the bolts on the wings of a plane. You know, you can be looking out the window as you're taking off on that plane and a bolt can fly off, and that's one extinct species. But how many bolts does it take before the wings fall off and then as humans, we're all lost because the Earth crashes? So I look at each species as a bolt that I have a responsibility to save so that the plane doesn't go down. So if we can get people to think about that, then we can get them to think about conservation of all the life that's on Earth. And that's what zoos are all about.
Learn more about great museums at greatmuseums.org. You can order this episode of Great Museums on DVD for $24.95 plus $5.95 shipping and handling. Call 1-800-230-4453 or order online at greatmuseums.org. Museums hold the treasures and tell the tales of the people and places that make America great. Funding for Great Museums is provided by the Eureka Foundation, dedicated to the educational power of television and new media. Exercise your curiosity. Explore America's great museums.